Good morning. We're going to be reading in the book of John. We're starting chapter 18, which is Jesus' arrest. As you're turning to chapter 18, then I'm going to go over a couple things. Last week we talked about the word holy and what that means. And so holy means purity, but not just pure. You know, when you're at the grocery store, you see a box of something and it has pure ingredients. Okay. We're talking about divine purity, which is something that is far and away more pure than the cheese in your macaroni and cheese, right? Because this is perfectly pure. It's not just pure in consistency. This is God and His perfect purity. And so I'm going to throw in a new word at you today. And this word is, it's an ugly word. We don't like it. And as a result of that, we have watered it way down. So the word is profane. And so you may not even be that familiar with the word. It just sounds really ugly. It's something that's awful. And it is. You probably are familiar with this word being used in the word profanity. And this is where we have watered that word down to just mean bad words. When you say bad words, you're using profanity. But the root of that word is profane. What profane is, it is the opposite of holy. Maybe not even just the opposite. Anything that isn't holy or pure is profane. And it's really important for us to understand that, because in our fallen nature, we are profane. And I know we don't like to hear that. It's very uncomfortable to hear that you are profane. This ugly word. How dare you accuse me of being profane? It's not just your language, it's your heart. That we come into this world with a fallen nature, and you have a broken heart. And when I say heart, I'm talking about your will. What you want out of life is very self-seeking. And last week I talked about myself in my 20s, that I was very self-centered and selfish. Well, that's because I have the same fallen nature that everyone else does. And by the world's standards, you would say this is A-okay. Matter of fact, it's the default state. It's kind of just assumed that you carry out your business in self-interest. This is just the norm. And it's so normal, it's even in economics, that in the economic world, they say that a rational consumer pursues self-interest. They do what's in their best interest. And we'll say there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Okay, that's the way the world works. It's accepted by the world, but that doesn't mean it's holy. Holy is perfect. And last week we talked about Jesus' prayer, and that He prayed for us to be in unity with one another and with Him and with God and the Holy Spirit. He prayed for perfect unity. And that relationship requires that we surrender this self-centered nature, that I'm no longer thinking about myself all the time, but now I'm actually putting that same emphasis. I love my neighbor in the way that I used to love myself. And so I put other people first before me. I put myself last. And so that's the proper order of things. In order to have an eternal, meaning lasting forever, system, you have to be in this state. You cannot be in this self-centered state. And we Christians, we get criticized a lot because of how this is presented. And another thing I want to talk about today is that, and it's worship. I want to ask the question of what is this thing we call worship? It's not just something you do on Sunday when you go to church and you're praying or singing or whatever it is. When we think of the word worship, you probably think of someone falling on their knees, bowing down, and worshiping something. Okay, and it can be that. That's fine. I want to give you a working definition today to help us go deeper on this. And I'm going to suggest, this is not the fullness of what worship is, but just for now, I want to define worship as where you put your attention. Okay, so all week long, not just on Sunday, 24/7, especially when you are in private. There's no one watching you. Where are you putting your attention? Okay, so if you look at the world and what people are paying attention to, it's usually wickedness. I mean, I'm being real with you here. I'm not just trying to wave my finger and say bad, bad, bad. Okay? What people are pursuing, what they're interested in, what they're consuming is usually evil. And let me give you the case of television programming or music or movies. You go to the movies and it captures your attention. We have this word, you're being entertained. You're being entertained. And so you sit there wide-eyed, munching on some popcorn and drinking a soda and consuming this media that is being presented to you. And what's in that media? Usually it's a whole lot of violence, sex, craziness, wicked things. That's what's in that. And so again, I'm not just waving my finger and saying bad, bad, bad. What I'm telling you is there's something better, better, better. Not just a little bit better, infinitely better. And all these things that we give our attention of the world, they are temporal, they're short lasting. And even if they bring you some pleasure, it's not going to last for very long. And so what I'm telling you here is there's something fantastically better than what we're currently consuming. Watch the news. You turn on the news, what's on there? Car accidents, murders, crime, all kinds of debauchery. And okay, they'll throw in a fluff piece, there'll be one little segment that's got puppies or something, but the overall content of our news programming is people doing bad things. Okay, and why? Because we like it. And that's the case with movies, TV, music. If you listen to modern music or even oldies and you pay attention to what those lyrics are saying, it is wicked. I have stopped listening to secular music, and when I go to the grocery store, they'll be playing songs that I know from the past. I used to sing along to these songs all the time, and I hear it, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, is that what? I did not know that's what they were talking about. It is wickedness, and we enjoy it. We like it. I used to watch this show called Game of Thrones, and in Game of Thrones, every episode they have some sort of crazy new way to murder somebody. I used to really enjoy this show, but I caught myself. I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I watching this? And the truth is, I liked it. That's why I was watching it. And we have to recognize this about ourselves, that we have a fallen nature, right? Just because things feel good doesn't mean they are good, okay? When I'm watching an action film and the dude is going through and shooting up all the enemy and killing all these people, if I'm getting enjoyment out of that, there's something wrong in me, okay? Because this should not be enjoyable. So I'm just going to say, wherever you put your attention, that's where your worship is. And how much of your time is spent worshiping God and how much of it is spent consuming media of one form or another that is wicked. And if you are putting your attention into wicked things, that you need to know that. Okay, you got to find out where you are, and so that you can course correct. Okay, but maybe it's not media. Maybe you don't even watch TV. That's fine. But where's your focus? Where are your thoughts? Is there a whole bunch of drama going on in your life? Where are your thoughts? Because wherever those thoughts are, that's where your worship is. And so when I come back to this relationship between the words holy, which is pure and perfect, and profane, if you are thinking about wicked things, that's the profane. And I know it's an ugly word, but you got to recognize what's going on inside of yourself. If you love the profane, something is very, very wrong, and you need to catch it, find it, and then ask God to heal you of this so that what you want is actually pure and good, and that you turn to Him. And so I used the movie example before. If you sit there, you might sit there for 2 hours, wide-eyed, and just consuming this. When was the last time you spent 2 hours in the presence of God? When was the last time you did something like that? We are more than willing to go sit and watch a movie for that long and enjoy it. But do we enjoy spending that time with God? Because the things of God heal. The things of God enlighten. The things of God edify. They lift you up. They take you to new places where you have never been. The things of the world, they pull you down. And so it's really important that we start recognizing these things. Now, all this to say, I want that in your minds as we jump into John 18, where Jesus is about to be arrested, because Jesus is doing what's in the will of the Father. And the will of the Father is holy and good and pure and perfect. These guys that come to arrest Jesus, they are doing the will of their father, Satan. He's the ruler of this world. And that's where his will is to do wicked, evil things. And I want you to see these guys are choosing to carry out the will of their father, the devil. Okay? And why this is so important. You'll see that God gives people every last opportunity to do the right thing, and they keep choosing to do the wicked thing over and over and over and over and over again. And Jesus does this. He gives them opportunities to back away from arresting him. Okay, now it's the will of God that he go to the cross, and God is going to use these wicked people to do something unbelievable, so spectacular. He's going to pay the price for the sins of the world. Okay, so this is a really important thing that has to happen. You'll see that these guys, they recognize him for who he is, and they do this anyway. And so, as we're walking through our life, and we, even if we acknowledge God exists, and he's good, and that, okay, I'm a Christian, and I believe, and all of that. Okay, what are you doing though? What's going on in your life? Does it match with God's will for your life, or are you doing something else? And so this is a really difficult question. We need to ask God to search our hearts the same way that David did in the Psalms. They're like, please, Lord, search my heart. I can't spot these things, and I'm so blind, especially when it comes to things that are pleasurable. I am so blind and weak to turn away from pleasurable things that are bad. And so we all struggle with this, and so we have to turn to him to find that strength, and then he will have us overcome. It is a wonderful, wonderful thing that you will see God's strength when you're able to overcome sinful ways that you couldn't do on your own. But you're going to see these guys in John 18, they don't overcome. Right? They are totally obedient to wickedness. All right, well, let's jump in here to John 18. I went on long enough about that. We're going to be reading verses 1 through 12. When Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples across the brook Kidron, where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas, having procured a band of soldiers and some officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, went there with lanterns and torches and weapons. Then Jesus, knowing all that would happen to him, came forward and said to them, "Whom do you seek?" They answered him, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus said to them, "I am he." Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. When Jesus said to them, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. So he asked them again, "Whom do you seek?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." And Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he. So if you seek me, let these men go." This was to fulfill the word that he had spoken, "Of those whom you have given me, I have lost none." Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. So Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword into its sheath. Shall I not drink the cup that the Father has given me?" So the band of soldiers and their captain and the officers of the Jews arrested Jesus and bound him. Okay, the first verse here, when Jesus had spoken these words, that's the prayer. So he had just finished the high priestly prayer. We spent about 3 weeks covering the high priestly prayer, where he prays for himself, and then he prays for his disciples, and then he prays for us, the believers that would come after he had already completed his mission on earth. His ministry is done. It's for us, the thousands of years of people that would come after him. And so now, as soon as he finishes those words, he went out with his disciples across the brook Kidron. And so this brook Kidron is, the word brook here is maybe not the best translation. There's not really a good translation for this into English. The literal translation is that it's a winter stream. It's like a seasonal river that flows. It's mostly dry. We would call this a wash. Here in Arizona, we'd call it a wash. But it's also kind of in a ravine or a gully. And so other translations of the Bible will call it Kidron Valley, the ravine of Kidron. And okay, so here in the ESV, they call it the brook Kidron. And so Jesus is going to leave the Garden of Gethsemane. He goes down into this Kidron Valley, and he's going to go to this other garden. Okay, well, this Valley of Kidron is mentioned in the Bible many, many times, especially in the Old Testament. In this little ravine, it's not little, it's a ravine, this is where the city of David was. King David had his palace there and all this. And on the far side of the ravine were tombs, lots and lots of tombs. And so many scholars believe that David, during his time when he wrote Psalm 23, he was talking about the place where he lived. When he says, "As I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." Many scholars think this valley of the shadow of death, he's looking around at his environment and seeing all these tombs. And he knows that one day he's going to be in one of those tombs. And so Jesus, this is so beautiful. Jesus, on his way to be arrested, he's walking through the valley of the shadow of death. It's so beautiful. It's not a coincidence. Okay, the Bible is just chock full of things like this, where there's no way it could be a coincidence. And it's actually a fulfillment of something very poetic that David, King David, wrote many, many years before. And it was such a beautiful, not a coincidence, confirmation. Okay, it's just fantastic. And so this valley is very important. And like I said, it's mentioned in many Old Testament passages that also relate to this moment where Jesus is walking through the valley. And I encourage you to go look those up because it's very edifying. So they cross the valley and then they go to another garden. Well, okay, so these gardens, the Garden of Gethsemane, where they just came from, and this other garden where they're going to, is not like a vegetable garden, okay? We would think of it more as a park, but it has an agricultural purpose. And so it's likely these gardens had olive trees or something of that nature. And so there was some like private enterprise going on there, but it's also a place where you could kind of go and sit down. It's just peaceful, and you can kind of meet with people, and it's a semi-public space where there's agriculture of one sort or another going on. And so they're going to this other garden, and we go to verse 2. It says, "Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples." Okay, so this is one of the regular places that these guys go to. And I'll say R.C. Sproul, in his commentary on this, is just really cool. He says, Jesus has all these guys coming after him, but in reality, Jesus is going to them. Judas has betrayed Jesus, and he's got these military guys and the Jewish leaders coming to arrest Jesus. But Jesus could have left. But instead of going away, he's going straight into the storm. He is going to them. It's like he found them more than they found him. So anyway, moving on. Verse 3. "So Judas, having procured a band of soldiers and some officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, went there with lanterns and torches and weapons." Okay, and other translations of this, it's not just a band of soldiers and religious leaders. It's like a regiment, which is a regiment in the Roman army would have 1,000 soldiers. Now, when they would get deployed to go do something, they wouldn't take all 1,000 of them, but it may have been 600. We don't know how many soldiers went in on this, but what we do know is overwhelming force. It's not just some small group of soldiers. This is probably at least 100 soldiers coming to arrest Jesus. The other aspect of this is they come with weapons, torches, lanterns. They're anticipating a resistance, a fight. They're expecting a fight, and so they are coming with an overwhelming force ready to take Jesus, even if it means fighting. So what you're seeing here is a showdown between Jesus and the religious authorities and the Roman Empire. It's a showdown between the integrity of Christ and the corruption of the system that was in this world at the time. And you see a showdown between truth and lies, a showdown between good and evil. And how Jesus handles this is just absolutely amazing, and it demonstrates his authority and his position of who he really is. It's just wonderful. Verse 4, then Jesus, knowing all that would happen to him, came forward and said to them, whom do you seek? He knows what's coming. He knows what's coming. He knows how he's going to be treated. He's going to go through a kangaroo court, as Sproul puts it, and be wrongly convicted. He is going to be tortured, humiliated, and executed. He knows what's coming for him. He could have left town. If this were me and I was facing arrest and what Jesus was facing. So if this were me and I knew that this kind of treatment was coming for me, I would probably be trying to get out of town. I would not be sitting here having this conversation with you. I would be wanting to exit stage right as quickly as possible. I'd say, I love you guys, but I can't do this. I'm sorry, this is too much. But Jesus knows what's coming, and he's going to go forward anyway. He steps forward. It says Jesus came forward. He stepped into this, and he asked this question, whom do you seek? Oh boy. He knows who they're looking for. They know who they're looking for. This question has an implication to it, and what that implication is are you sure you really want to do this? Okay, that's what he's really asking here. They still had a chance to stop and turn back. It wasn't too late. And they say to him, Jesus of Nazareth. And now I want you to notice Jesus' response to being called out. He doesn't deny who he is or try to get away. He's not pointing the finger at other people or say, it wasn't me. Like, why are you trying to get me? He faces down this evil entourage with divine courage. It's just absolutely amazing. And so Jesus says to them, I am he. Now this phrase here, I am he. In the English, it's really not doing it service. There are 7 I am statements in the book of John. There's one in Revelation. And when Jesus says these I am statements, what he's really saying is, I am that I am. This is the name of God. Yahweh means I am that I am. And so what Jesus is really saying when he makes these I am statements is that I am God. And this is hugely profound and troubling to the people that are hearing this, because they think he's committing heresy or some horrible thing, the horrific thing that you don't claim to be God. Well, but what if you are God? This guy has come into the world and he has fulfilled many of the prophecies that their own scriptures predicted. And here he is showing them things that there's no way this guy's just some normal guy. Everybody that hears him say, like, they're shocked, amazed. This guy speaks with authority. No one speaks like this guy. And here he is. And so what he's saying, when he makes the I am statement, like the bread of life, he says, I am the bread of life, or I am the true vine. What he's really saying is, the true vine, I am that I am. And so he's claiming to be God. Now, he doesn't ever come out and just say, I am God. Okay? He leaves room for you to figure it out. Okay? And it's not difficult to figure it out. And even these guys that are coming to arrest him, they know that there's something up with this guy, that he's not just a regular guy. And we're going to see that coming up here. And I'll talk about why there's some confusion on that. But here he is. He's saying, I am he. And he's using that phrase, I am that I am, when he says, I am he. Okay. Verse 6, when Jesus said to them, I am he, they drew back and fell to the ground. So I got two interpretations on this. The primary interpretation is that Jesus and he's actually performing a miracle here. He's using divine power to knock them down, right? These miracles are used to demonstrate his authority. He's not just coming to heal people and show off all of his amazing abilities to prove that who he is. He's demonstrating his authority. And so here he is performing a miracle in which he's able to just totally knock these guys over. Like, you think you're going to come and take me? Guess what? I can knock you all of you guys down without even breaking a sweat. And so that's one interpretation. Another interpretation is that, Jesus is the source of life. He is the author of life. And these guys are actually denying him and his existence. And so they have a moment as they're coming to take him wrongfully and to torture him and all of this, they lose their strength. And so that's an interesting interpretation as well. Either way, it's evidence Jesus is who he says he is. And they just got knocked over and he didn't even lift a finger. So they have to know something is up here. And they know who he is. And you're going to find out here in a minute, like, why did they bring an army to arrest one guy? And Jesus is going to ask that question. And the reason they brought the army is because they know. Now, for all of us in this case, God gives us every opportunity to choose him. And the saddest thing is that people will still choose wickedness and selfishness, self-centeredness. They still will choose that over a good, holy, perfect God. They will choose that, and it's heartbreaking. And you're going to see this happen here. These guys are doing this. And what we have to be so careful about is we are just as capable of having darkened minds and doing the same stuff. Okay, so verse 7. And he asks again, whom do you seek? And what he's really saying is, are you sure you want to arrest the Son of God? It's not too late. You still can call this off. And so they come back and they say, Jesus of Nazareth. This is a very bad move. But this is where a paradox comes. A paradox is when there's two things that seem contradictory, but they aren't. Right? They can coexist at the same time. They, in one sense, they are acknowledging who he is. Like I said, by the strength of the force they have brought, he is a tremendous threat to the Jewish leadership and the whole system that they have going. And so they need to shut him up, snuff him out, get rid of him. But the fact that they need to get rid of him and they're willing to go to these great lengths to make that happen tells you that Jesus is who he says he is. And so while on one hand they're wanting to deny him, in the strength of their denial, they're actually acknowledging him to be who he says he is. They have to shut down Jesus and his movement. Everything they have established and going for themselves is at stake here. There's a lot of corruption and illegitimacy and all kinds of awfulness going on in this system. And Jesus has come and is revealing the truth, and this scares them to death. Verse 8, Jesus answered, I told you that I am he. So if you seek me, let these men go. He's already told them that he's the one that they're looking for. What are they waiting for? You come and you say you're seeking Jesus of Nazareth. He stepped forward and he said, I'm he. Why aren't they arresting him? Because they know. Jesus is basically just handing himself over to these guys, and all he's asking is to let his disciples leave in peace. Here, I'm going to surrender to you guys. Just take me. And what are they waiting for? Verse 9, this was to fulfill the word that he had spoken, of those whom you gave me, I have lost not one. Okay, so he had just spoken those words in the high priestly prayer when speaking of his disciples, and that's back in chapter 17, verse 12. He says, while I was with them, I kept them in your name, which you have given me. I have guarded them, and not one of them has been lost except the son of destruction. Okay, so that applies specifically to the apostles. He hasn't lost one, and this is going to hold true here. Now, this also applies, this not losing anyone that he has been given to him also applies to all believers throughout all time, and you'll find that referenced in John chapter 6. I won't read it right now, but if you want to go find that, it talks about that. Verse 10, then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. And the servant's name was Malchus. So a couple different interpretations on this when Peter cuts off this guy's ear. One view on this is that Peter was a skilled fisherman. He was very good with a knife because he had to, clean all these fish and all this. And so he very deftly just slices the guy's ear off. It's kind of like a warning shot. Another interpretation of this is that Peter is swinging to chop this guy in half, right down the middle, and the guy moved, and it just so happened that his ear got caught in the way, and so the guy loses his ear from that way. I tend to follow the second view because Peter is a very passionate guy, and he said before that he'd lay his life down for Christ, and here he is. He's ready to fight, even though there's a far superior force up against them. And so I think he probably was like, okay, I got to take matters into my own hand. This is not going to end well. And he goes ahead and swings this sword and chops this guy's ear off. Okay, there's some very valuable lessons that we need to take away from this. It was God's will for Jesus to be arrested here. And it was in God's will for Christ to be crucified. Even if that doesn't make sense, it's okay if we don't understand this. But it's the truth that it was God's will for Jesus to go to the cross. Well, what's at stake here? Jesus going to the cross provides an atonement. He's paying the debt for all of our sins. And if Jesus doesn't go to the cross, then there's no forgiveness of sins. And so there is a huge amount at stake here. And it's God's will for Christ to do this. And there's glory to come from this. Huge amounts of glory for Christ for doing this, for carrying out this task. Well, Peter, thinking he's doing the right thing, is going to jump in here and interfere because he's got in his mind what he thinks needs to happen, and he's carrying out his own will. And it makes sense to him. And we have to be very careful because we can be the same way. We can get very passionate. We can want good things, the right things, and we put a lot of energy into something, we can actually be working against God's will. So we have to be very careful with that. Now, another thing to point out here about this verse is that in parentheses, John has inserted the servant's name was Malchus. Okay, well, this is a really great detail. Sometimes people will accuse the Bible of being fake or made up. Well, these kinds of details, like the name of the servant, Malchus, are great for proving that to be not true, okay? Because if you're making up a story, you don't want any sort of accountability. You don't want any piece of information that someone could go fact check. Now, when John wrote his gospel, it was still possible to go back and find Malchus himself, or maybe Malchus had died, but there would be somebody that knew Malchus and could confirm that there was this servant, the high priest's servant named Malchus, who had his ear chopped off. And so it's easy to confirm. And so you would not include details like this in a made-up story because it would be very easy to reveal it to be fake. And so there's a lot of this kind of reasoning in the book called The Case for Christ. And so I encourage you to read that, especially if you're having doubts about the authenticity of the Gospels. There's some really good information in that book that will show you that they are reliable, that this really happened. Okay, verse 11. So Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword into its sheath. Shall I not drink the cup that the Father has given me?" So, like I said before, Peter was doing what he thought he was right. He's getting a rebuke from Christ. When Christ says that he talks about this cup that he has to drink from, that means the crucifixion, that he's going to have to go take this punishment for the sin of the world. Like, this needs to happen, and don't interfere with this, right? It has to be this way. It was God's plan for this to happen. And as Peter is stepping up to kind of take charge and take matters into his own hands, he's really risking interfering with the entire mission. What Christ came to do, it had to be 100% him. And soon the disciples are going to all be scattered. They're going to run off and be afraid and leave Christ all alone. Christ is going to have to walk on from this moment alone. And so he has to do this alone because he is sinless. It can't be 99% Christ and 1% Peter. It wouldn't work that way. It has to be 100% Christ. And so now God is sovereign, and he's going to make this work. There's a part of the story that is not mentioned here in John that is mentioned in Luke. And this is the part where Jesus actually heals the ear of this servant. And so we can go to Luke 22 and read a few verses here and get some details that John did not include in his gospel. So Luke 22, verse 49, and when those who were around him saw what would follow, this is the disciples seeing that Jesus is going to get arrested, they said, Lord, shall we strike with the sword? And one of them, that was Peter, struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear. But Jesus said, no more of this. And he touched his ear and healed him. Then Jesus said to the chief of priests and officers of the temple and elders who had come out against him, have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs? When I was with you day after day in the temple, you did not lay hands on me. But this is your hour when darkness reigns. Oh, man, this verse is powerful, okay? So what he's saying here is whatever crime they're accusing of him of, is it worth bringing out the army to arrest him? You know, if somebody has committed a misdemeanor nowadays, you don't send the entire police force to go arrest them. Usually just takes one officer in a cruiser and they just go do an arrest. That's an everyday kind of thing. And Jesus saying, I was in the temples every day. You could have arrested me there. Why didn't you do it then? Well, the answer to that reveals who he really is, because they couldn't arrest him at the temple because people that were listening to him, there were masses of people that he was reaching and he was changing their hearts. And if they tried to arrest him in the temple, there would have been a riot. And they know this. And why would there be a riot? Because this guy is who he says he is. He really is the Son of God. So they got to come out at night with an army to try to get this guy. And then he says, but this is your hour when darkness reigns. So what he's saying is, like, evil is about to play its hand. Evil's laying out its hand in full and is going to try to take out the Son of God. Okay? He's saying, like, enjoy this victory while it lasts, or it's seeming victory, because it's not going to be a victory. It's going to end up being a stunning defeat. Okay, back to John. This is the last verse for today, verse 12. So the band of soldiers and their captain and the officers of the Jews arrested Jesus and bound him. The deal was sealed. The question was, are you really going to do this? You really want to do this? And the answer is yes. Jesus, the Son of God, was in the custody of an evil, corrupt system that wanted him dead. And his last words before being taken away, he's telling him, this is your hour when darkness reigns. These are ominous words that they should be listening to. This is very bad. Could it be that evil will win? Absolutely not. All of this is going to work out for good, but not just good. It's not just going to be okay on the other side of this. Jesus is actually going to change the world with what he's about to do, and he's going to use these evil people to get it done. And so you can see the sovereignty of God in this, that Jesus is submitting himself to these wicked guys who think they have won, and then he's going to come back, and the victory will be so overwhelming that it will change the entire world, and he's going to set millions, billions even, of people free from the bondage of their sin. And we got to remind ourselves of this in these dark days. Okay, we live in very dark times, and I think you know this. Okay, when I turn on the news, man, every day I am blown away at the wicked stuff that's going on. I don't understand. Part of what I don't understand is how this whole system could even keep running. It's so corrupt and so evil, and it's just like we're on the precipice of destruction. But here's the thing that Christ is teaching us right here 2,000 years ago, okay, that no matter how dark things seem, God is stronger. When we see evil playing its hand in full, you have to know that goodness is greater. And this perfect, pure, holy God has got these guys outmatched, outgunned. He's going to win every single time. And so when we see evil that's overwhelming in its strength, it will open your mind. You're going to realize, man, God is even greater than I could have possibly imagined. And he will use the evil we see in the world to open up the world to more of his glory. And so this is a fantastic thing that we have to look forward to. And so what we need to realize is that we shouldn't fear evil because God is greater. We tend to get fixated on the evil. And I say, what do you worship? Well, we worship evil when we kind of fixate on that. And oh no. Okay, so we got to keep our eyes on Christ and trust, have faith that he's going to come in and all this evil is going to have a stunning defeat. And so I just want to bring that peace to you today. So it's not evil that we fear. Evil should fear God. Evil should be afraid of the goodness. And here's what's so amazing about this is if you are one with God, then evil should be afraid of you. Right? Because you are one with the Lord and he is going to protect you. He's never going to leave you, forsake you. That doesn't mean you're not going to face challenges, okay? But he's with you. He's going to walk with you, and you have something fantastic to look forward to, okay? You don't have anything to fear if you're on God's side. Now, if you're on the evil side, you got a whole lot to worry about, all right? This world is inverted. It's upside down. And so, this is intentional. This is God's plan for dealing with our fallen nature and the sin of the world. The whole thing is turned upside down, and what rises to the top is evil. Okay? And the people that are good and righteous, they tend to sink to the bottom. All right? And this is what Jesus was talking about when he said, the first will be last and the last will be first. And so if you want to be in the kingdom of God, you have to surrender everything. And there's so many examples of this in the Bible. People that are pursuing self-interest will rise to the top. They'll do anything to be successful, to be at the top, to have the power and the control. Well, God is about to flip this whole thing right side up. And those that sacrificed for righteousness, that did the right thing, that really believed in Christ, even under difficult, impossible circumstances, they are going to be the ones that are running the show with Christ at the top. He's going to be the king of the millennial kingdom. He's going to reign with an iron staff for 1,000 years. And so there's a tremendous sorting going on of who's who and what's what. And so no matter how difficult life seems now, you have to understand it's all going to get flipped on its head. And we're going to have a perfect government. Can you imagine such a thing? No corruption, zero corruption, complete integrity. This is what's coming for us. And look at all the accomplishments that have happened in the past century just in a corrupt system. Can you imagine what the world will be like when there's no more corruption and you have an incorruptible body and you live a much, much longer life and the food is healthy and everything is right and good? That's what's coming. Okay, and right now we're in this testing period to see what we're made of, who's who and what's what. And so it is a tremendous burden to carry in this world to be a Christian and to be true and legit and to actually be concerned for other people in a world that just seems to reward evil and wickedness. But what I'm telling you is something much better is coming, and so we have to prepare ourselves for that. And whatever challenges come our way, we need to embrace them fully with the knowledge that God sees everything. and that he sees our integrity, he sees our pursuit of holiness, and he is with us, supporting us, strengthening us, and he's going to get us to our destination, and that we can trust in him completely. And so we just got to hold on tight and keep turning towards him until this transition takes place, and then everything is going to be made right. He says every tear will be wiped away. And so, man, I cannot wait for this to come. Lord, I thank you so much for sending your son into this world to die for our sins. Lord, that's the thing that gives us access to you. And I don't know how to express my gratitude for that. We don't deserve that. It's too much even to ask for. But yet you have given us that. You have poured grace out under our lives. And that transforms us to be more like you. And so, God, I just bask in that beautiful glory that you pour out on us, the grace and glory and goodness that you have in infinite quantities. And Lord, it pains my heart to see people turn away from that. They don't understand what they're turning away from. They don't understand what they're rejecting, and yet they still do it. And so, Lord, I just ask for strength to persevere, to endure to the end, and each and every person that you call out, that I just ask that you prepare us to meet them and embrace them and bring them to you. In your name we pray. Amen.